Okay, I normally don't say this very often, but this is going to be one of the most diverse episodes you have ever heard on this podcast. Just mostly because I'm moving from end to end on a bunch of different things, because I'm supposed to be talking about women and sex, but I have a bit of religion thrown in there. And I'm supposed to be focusing on stuff that affects Kenyans, even though, it can kind of go out there. But at the same time, I've got a bunch of news from Europe and North Korea. And all of this is particularly interesting, and I'm going to get into all of that. And I'm going to actually start from our very cross-national news, which, to be very honest, I was going to just do the whole Greta Thunberg tweet from 2018, where she talked about humans being wiped if we don't stop fossil fuel use in 5 years. And she made this tweet in 2018 June, and it's 2018 June to the exact week. Actually, it's even past the day that she had said that it would be wiped out in 5 years. So this is very clear advice to steer clear from some of the shit that children say, because, they're speaking as children, even though Greta Thunberg actually isn't a kid. Although, considering that I found that story wasn't all that interesting, let me bring out one from France that is a little bit wilder, even though sort of within the same light. Now, in France, one of the local councils funded an event celebrating, get this, ecosexuality, where performers quote-unquote make love to plants. Children were present, some adults were naked, and the best part about all of this? The plants didn't give consent. Like, people usually talk about how wild Greta Thunberg looks and acts and sounds and, the entire aura of everything. But you listen to some of these stories, like this one from France, and you just get weirded out at how some people behave. And I'm not even about to call it a white people thing. Like, that's just some woke people shit that just seems a little bit wild. Like, first of all, I don't see why it is that some of these people decided to have children present. Especially when you're going to do the deed with trees. Like, fine, I get it. You want to do your thing, it's fine, it's cool. But why bring the kids? Because you think about it, imagine a young boy going and seeing his friend's mom busy rubbing one off with one tree in doggy style, and the guy isn't even 10 years old yet, and he realizes that the friend's mom doesn't even know how to arch her back. Like, imagine what that shit will do for his psyche. Imagine him knowing that he can't rub one off now when he's a teenager because the friend's mom don't even know how to do it that well. Although, on the flip side, like, if the friend's mom hadn't even involved the kid, like, I'd have probably felt sorry for her because maybe she's looking for morning wood in the evening time. Like, that could be a thing. Or, some of these guys had that, unaweza kupata mti huku nje, and, they actually decided to take that literally. Although, then again, considering that they sort of did it without the plant's consent, I don't know if we can actually accuse them of rape, or, you can probably wonder if the plant sort of fingered them, because you don't know what part of the plants they actually sort of did themselves with. Like, trying to get to the root of the problem might actually seem like a foot fetish, pun intended. Or, to make matters even worse, because some of these woke people are very antisocial, imagine someone lost their virginity to a tree. Like, they were putting that back into it, and, they lost their virginity to something that was supposed to give the seed. It's a little bit weird, to be quite honest. And with all of that weirdness thrown in, now at least I know I can start things off on a less than weird note. So, to start things off, I will say, your morning, let's do it. Riding that palm tree, its branches is bending for her to jump on it. Okay, that was just dumb. Okay, let me look for whatever sense is left and just say, welcome to Breaktime on West Side, your number one Breaktime podcast, coming to you from Nairobi, Kenya. The man on the mic is a man who believes that instead of shagging trees, it's probably better to smoke them. Because frankly speaking, I don't even do weed, but it's a lot better than you trying to shag a tree. He's a man whose sickness for the thickness prevents him from skinny dipping. It is none other than your tall, dark, and mildly handsome man, Sir Denver B. This show is Tweet Street, the show where we take a deep dive into Twitter, pull up a couple of tweets, and break them down a little bit. Now, as usual, if you know the drill, you can repeat it after me. If you don't know the drill, then I'ma say it for you. And if you know the drill, but you haven't become a participant yet, then what are you waiting for? It's a pretty simple drill, almost sounds like a song, and it goes like this. You see that tweet, you like that tweet, you want us to discuss that tweet, you send that tweet. You send it to the DMs of @BagakaTheD, which happens to be my personal Twitter handle, and I will take it from there and I will handle it accordingly on Facebook and on IG if it happens to be a screenshot, a screen grab, or it was used on a reel and it is a tweet that was pulled from Twitter. Then the place to send it to is @BreakTimeOnWestside on Facebook or @BreakTimeOnWestside on IG, and I will take it from there and handle it accordingly because the DMs are always open. Forgot to add that part. And I would really appreciate it if you showed some love on whatever app that you're using, if it's Apple, Spotify, Deezer, whichever one of them. If it has a chance for you to follow or subscribe and or give a rating and even a review, then I'd really appreciate that. Helps me really get boosted up on these apps and gets recommended to more people, which allows us to grow the community of Breaktime on Westside and, discuss more and interesting things. Plus, I get happy and shit. Now, with all of that said and done, I do have a bunch of tweets that I need to get into, of which they are very interesting and do deserve their own time. But before I do that, I want us to discuss something that I saw not too long ago, which was actually a particularly interesting story. And it involved Americans, Kenyans, and a little bit of religion. But anyways, let me just read for you the headlines because I tend to think that some of y'all might have even heard about this. So the headline is, and I quote, "American historian reveals that Satan comes from Kenya, not heaven." Like, the fact that there's someone who's coming out to say that Satan comes from Kenya, not heaven, and it's not a Kenyan in Kenya, was particularly wild to me. Now, normally for me, I'd be like, what in the devil dick did she get when she came here? But considering that I have a particularly good feeling that she wasn't actually in Kenya, or she hasn't ever really spent that much time in Kenya to get dick down like that, I figured, I might as well read the story. So I managed to snag one of the articles here, so let me just read it for you. It says, and I quote, "In a provocative assertion that contradicts traditional belief systems, renowned American historian Florence Miller suggests that Satan, the iconic figure of malevolence, hails not from the celestial planes but from the earthly realm of Kenya in East Africa. Miller, a prominent figure in the Organization of American Historians, bases her striking thesis on extensive research drawn from ancient texts, archaeological artifacts, and DNA analysis from Kenya. This deviation from accepted religious narratives asserts that Satan, rather than being a fallen angel banished from heaven, is a figure deeply rooted in the history and culture of Kenya. Miller sheds light on this radical perspective, stating that Satan was originally known as Prince Kamaanyi, a monarch in the Wanga kingdom. His story, as per Miller's research, starts with a beloved king admired by his subjects. Over time, his demeanor drastically shifted from benevolent to cruel, leading his people to label him as quote-unquote the devil. Addressing the media from California, Miller explained her findings aim to challenge established religious doctrine, particularly the inaccurate portrayal of Satan as Lucifer, and ultimately reshape society's perceptions. Unsurprisingly, Miller's controversial theory has faced significant skepticism and critique, particularly from the African community. Many Africans, when questioned about the findings, dismissed the claims as baseless and an attempt to malign African self-esteem. End quote. Okay, now that I have seen the term DNA analyses, I do tend to think that maybe she did receive a bit of devil dick. Or maybe she had a devil's threesome in Nairobi or somewhere in Kenya. I don't know. Anyways, the thing is, I know a lot of people were busy saying that, this is wrong, she's busy speaking ill on Africans, blah, blah, blah. And to be honest, yes, it does seem that way, except that when I think about it as a Kenyan, I don't think she might entirely be wrong. And I know this is about to make me seem as though I'm an-African or not loyal or, not proud of my African roots and shit, but let's just look at it for a little bit and probably you might see where I'm going with all of this. First of all, there is a place in Kenya known as Hell's Gate. Yes, there is actually a place in Kenya known as Hell's Gate. Now, of course, it's not like there's a bunch of demons that are waiting in there to kill you. Some people have died around Hell's Gate, but it doesn't mean that there were demons or ghosts or fallen angels that were going to kill you there. And I know there's people that have made this joke and they've alluded to it a fuck ton of times. There was even a radio show where the guys were busy talking about this. And yes, it seems like the most overused one, so I just wanted to get that one out of the way because there's some other things that also need to be pointed out. Because on one end, we've had a bunch of Jesuses. We've had at least one Messiah. We have Yeshua Tongaren. We have a prophet that is supposedly this prophet of God that speaks to God all the time, called Prophet Owor. So to think that there's no devil here is a little bit odd. Like, you'd probably expect the other extreme to at least have one or two people from here, right? Like, we've had so many examples of people that are trying to be some version of God or some version of Jesus out here in the streets, more so around Western Kenya, where the Wanga kingdom was based, and most of the Luhya community is actually based. Are you really going to say that if there's going to be a Jesus from that community, they're not going to produce a devil as well? Like, I think it's only right that we have like two sides of the same coin, two sides of the religious coin. One is at the top, represents, the celestial heaven side, the other one at the bottom, sort of representing the celestial hell side. Like, you kind of think about it, it seems fairly plausible. I think that's the only fictional religious character that Luhyas haven't taken up, or just about every other Kenyan that has tried to go into religion and try to make themselves some sort of a figure. So, with that said, like, I don't entirely think it's wrong. I just don't think it's right the way she's sort of saying it. Although then again, maybe she actually did just get devil dick or was in a devil's threesome here. But either way, I will leave it at that because I have more important things to discuss in the tweets. So, on to our very first tweet of this episode. Paying for sex is a valid option. I have noticed that getting laid, especially as a guy, is quite hard, especially when you're not super attractive. When you talk to a girl as a guy, there's a pretty big chance that other guys try to get to know her as well. So there's always some competition going on. I also find it really intimidating how it's always us guys who have to approach. I'm just incredibly overwhelmed with all of this. I'm not some mega attractive super guy. I'm just some average dude who wants to feel a woman's touch. I don't really care too much about an emotional connection. I just want to be touched by a girl. I don't really want to deal with all of this nonsense. I'm quite young myself. I think I'm just gonna try find some young woman and pay her to have sex with me. I just want to be touched at this point. Others can get it for free with ease. Okay, now I know that there's a ton of guys that are gonna be like, I don't see why that's the case. This is simp behavior. Oh, he needs to work on himself. He needs to, go and start hitting on women. And I'm sure there's a bunch of babes who are like, is it really that hard for you to get sex? Like, dudes out here get it pretty easily. But the reality of it is, what he's saying is actually true. It's not easy for a lot of guys to get sex, and there's just some guys that are very socially awkward that they don't even know how to talk to the opposite sex. And it's something that I actually see and I know of quite often. Like, especially younger dudes, it's a lot harder for them to interact with the opposite sex if they haven't been exposed early enough. And I'd argue if they've been in a single sex school for most of their lives, or single sex schools, then it's probably even harder because even that open interaction is going to be particularly hard for them. So in some way, contrary to popular opinion, I actually kind of agree with dude. Like, yes, paying for sex is actually a pretty valid option. There's some guys that just don't know how to talk to women and just want to bang. Like, they just want to feel that intimacy for the moment, and that's it. And maybe getting a hoe is probably what'll help them get there. And yes, there's someone that's gonna be like, but going and learning how to talk to a woman helps them better in the long run, which is all true. And I'm not refuting any of that. But if a guy just wants to get laid tonight, why would he have to go and start talking to a chick, of which that's something that might probably even involve him trying to get laid by this same girl for like a grand total of probably even up to 2 months, of which he's not even sure if it's going to happen, as opposed to just going out there and looking for a prostitute that he can bang for a couple of hundred, if not a couple of thousand, and just going and getting his thing on and getting done and paying her and she bounces. Like, isn't that one easier? Now, of course, I'm not going to act like that should be the end all be all. I do think that, working on your social capital and learning how to socialize and moving to a point where you're no longer socially awkward is a great thing. While I will talk on all of that and I will push for guys to, work on their self-improvement, not just going to the gym, not just trying to make money, but also working on their social skills, I can also understand that there's some people that are just very, very socially awkward, and it might actually take them a lot more time to pull a babe than it will be for them to, say, for example, make money. Like, there's some people that are just very good at making money but not very good at socializing with people. And yes, you learning social skills will help improve your network. It will help you get probably the woman of your dreams and shit. And you actually might be a pretty interesting person. You just don't know it because you don't interact with people as much, and you probably should. But if you're in a pinch where you really just want to get some, and you know very well that you can't pull a babe, then to a degree, there's a service that's being offered at a fee where you just pay a certain amount of money and you get some sex, and maybe that's the service that will suit you at that time. Although still, I'm a very big believer that you should still work on your social skills, even with that being said. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that I endorse prostitution or anything of that sort. If that's what you want to do, that's a you thing. But if someone's in a pinch and they want to do it, I don't think they need to be ostracized for it. But either way, with all of that said, I might be wrong about this shit. I will leave it at that and move it on. So on to our very next tweet of this episode. I am an unapologetic feminist and my partner is okay with it. Only weak men are intimidated by feminists. Really? Weak men are the only ones that are intimidated by Okay, first of all, I am going to talk about the whole men and being intimidated by feminists, but I just need to start by saying that you being a feminist and you having a husband are completely different things. Like, yes, you can have a husband that loves you, you can have a partner who's okay with you. Like, that's all perfectly okay, but it has nothing to do with you or your feminism. I think to a particular degree, you can say that, yes, they do sort of intersect, but at the end of the day, if she goes back home and she's a good wife, yes, she can have a partner that's okay with it, but it's because she goes back home and she acts like a good wife. Because a big part of the reason why feminists and more so radical feminists usually end up being particularly single isn't because there's no men who can support them, it's just that a lot of them aren't that great at being partners. Like, it's not that they're bad people, it's not that, there's no one that's really for them or wants to be with them. It's just that there's some of them that are just very toxic, very horrendous to be with, or they're just generally shit partners. Some of them are even hypocrites when it comes to being a good partner, but that's a story for a different day. So when you bring up the whole, I have a partner who's okay with it, all it shows is that you have a partner who's comfortable with you as a person and not necessarily your ideologies. I don't know if I'm making sense to y'all, but that's essentially what I'm trying to push here, which is like, if she takes her ideologies to the house and tries to push them 100%, there's a pretty good chance that dude might be tolerating her, or dude has issues with her but he just keeps quiet, or dude might be tolerating it and getting it from some other babe on the side while she's busy out here busy yapping him out. Like, it's not unsurprising if you hear or see such things happening. It's just that sometimes you find that there's some people who are in some sort of a relationship with someone like this, and they're like, you know what, I can't deal with this shit for too much, and I just want to stay here because of this and this benefits, or for this and this reasons. So I'm just gonna get someone on the side who will never profess any of this shit because they want dick and bank, and we can pretty much continue allowing this thing to go on. But with all of that said and done, the main point here is your partner, or at least you having a partner and you're a feminist, doesn't necessarily mean shit about whether strong men or weak men like feminists or are intimidated by them. Of which, to be quite honest, I don't think most men are actually intimidated by feminists, let alone whether it's strong or weak men. Like, the thing with feminists is, it's not that we are intimidated, we're just annoyed. Like, it's a case of tolerance and not necessarily a case of fear. Because if you are dealing with someone who wants to blame 90% of her problems on the fact that the male gender exists, I think to a certain point, like, you can start by trying to understand their point of view, or try to understand them, but eventually at some point you just kind of get tired of that shit. Like, yes, maybe we can talk about how, there's been inequality across the gender scale on a couple of things, yeah, but at the end of the day, like, you can't blame 100% of the 90% of the problems you're bringing up on men. And anyways, I don't really think that we're that intimidated, because for the most part, we know if we really just want to bring you guys down, all we have to do is just poke a hole in your tire and tell you not to call a man and change the tire yourself. Because normally at that point, that's when you guys actually realize the usefulness of men. But in terms of intimidation, we're not really intimidated, we're just tired. Or to use a much better word, we're irritated by you guys. So if we can avoid the irritation and, not have to deal with your shit, then we'd be particularly happy to do that. Although then again, I might be wrong about that, and maybe I am a weak man saying all of this shit. But either way, I am going to leave it at that and move things on to our very final tweet of this episode. Ladies, stop with the pretense. When a man invites you to his house, he is inviting you for sex. It's one of those unwritten social contracts. You come to his house, chop his food, and he chops you. If you don't want that, please decline the invitation. Not this thing of going to a man's house, chop his food, and when he wants to chop as well, you act surprised. But I thought we're just going to chill. What BS? If a man wants to chill, he chills with his friends, drinking, watching sports, or playing games, or talking shit. Not eating Doritos, watching some cheesy romantic movie. You come to a guy's place, stop being dramatic, pretending to be shy as if it's the first house you've entered. And to the guys, you shouldn't force her to get intimate with you. It's wrong and that's a crime. But you should show her the door. That's no crime. Learn or perish. Honestly, this feels very self-explanatory, to say the least. Because I was talking about this, a week ago? When I was busy saying this shit of selective ignorance. Like, this convenient yet selective ignorance that some babes have, where it's like, oh, you are invited by this guy. Oh, this guy's been paying for drinks. Especially when it comes to paying for drinks, even though they didn't, mention like the whole paying for drinks thing. If you see a guy going out of his way to do nice stuff for you, or should I say, trying to get you close to them, and they're busy trying to use nice stuff, or they're busy inviting you over to their place, for you as a babe to sit and be like, you know what, he probably doesn't want to smash, without at least contemplating it first, I think is just absolute bullshit. Because I tend to think that most grown women actually know for a fact that by the time a guy is calling you and telling you to come over to his place, there's a pretty good chance that he wants to lay pipe. And yes, of course, there's some guys that will be very unassuming about it, and you won't really pick it up from them all up until you end up in his house, or he just decides to make a move on you, of which I will attend to that in a little bit. But for the most part, this whole thing of just selectively being ignorant, like you decided to come over to a dude's place and you expected that he's going to feed you, have you like consume whatever content or entertainment he's going to give you, and then nothing's going to happen, I think for the most part is mostly quite dumb and very naive for a lot of women, because this is how dudes end up making a move on a babe, then all of a sudden they're being called creeps or abusers simply because they were trying to put up the signals, but you guys actively chose to ignore them. To which, yes, I know there's some dudes that don't give signals as well, or aren't particularly good at this shit, or they thought they were hinting even though they weren't, or you didn't notice it. But at the end of the day, if you suspect that dude wants to lay pipe, I tend to believe that it's up to you to at least ask if that's his expectation. If you're down for it, then you can go through with it. If you're not down for it, you can just tell him, look, I don't want to do any of that. Now, if a guy tells you that, oh yeah, we're just chilling and nothing is going to happen, and then he makes a move, then that's wrong on his part. I think he should be very open about it, especially in this day and age. Now, of course, I don't think a guy should text you and be like, come through, let's watch a movie, have some food and shit, and I intend on having sex with you, because that'll almost never work. But at least if he is asked, or if he is alluding to it, then at least, try and give some hints at it. Say that you're gonna cuddle or some shit. Say that you wanna spend time with shorty and chill for a bit, or Netflix and chill. Like, there's a lot better ways to say it than you flat out saying I want to have sex. But at the same time, I think it's also on the babes to be very cautious and at least ask, do you intend on us doing anything along with all of this? To which if he says yes, If you're down for it, go for it. If not, then don't. And if he says no, then you can go for it. And if he makes a move, then clearly he's the one who has played himself that, because he was the one who stated the terms as not sexual from the beginning. Although, then again, I might be wrong about all of this shit, so I want your thoughts on it. The DMs are open. On Twitter, it is @BagakaTheD. On Facebook and on IG, it is @BreakTime on Westside. Thank you so much for listening all the way till the end, and I will catch you guys on the next break.